Yes, I can't think of any paid platform now that doesn't say you need this.
Hi there and welcome to From Ideas to Results. I'm joined by Chris, who is our Director of Data and Paid here at Sleeping Giant Media, and we're exploring all the things that are happening in the world, particularly more data focused. One of the things that we wanted to talk about was around kind of GA4. So actually one of the challenges is that it's great, it's free, but it doesn't always tell the full picture. What sort of recommendations would you have for people to try to help almost enhance their performance and understanding of what's happening?
So trying to add that layer of behavioural analysis is really important. Things like session recordings, tools that are able to get a lot more granular than GA4 can do. You can certainly add a lot into GA4, but if you're on the free version, you're going to be limited into how many events you can have, how many dimensions you can pass, how many dimensions per event. It's limited to 25. So there's lots of limitations. Really great at understanding what has happened, but trying to get to the why is always the challenge. Quite often if you're saying to a developer, we've seen this happen, then why? Or how big of a problem is that? How many people are suffering that same issue? Especially when it comes around to things like API errors, console errors, those sorts of things. GA4 quite often just doesn't have that information. Sometimes when it does, it's fairly limited. So if you can add session recordings to that and say, we've seen this error, here's an example of 3 or 4 users that are encountering that problem. Oh, and by the way, it's happened to 10 users in the last week or 1,000 users in the last week. That is a game changer in terms of how do we prioritize it and also how to replicate it.
What are the options available? I know that there's obviously thousands. Any that sort of you've been using that you feel actually have shown promise?
Yeah, there's probably 2 to mention that are sort of top of market. There is Contentsquare and also FullStory, and we've actually run a POC on the 2 and have started a bigger project with FullStory. Both of them do some very similar things, but FullStory just tipped it a little bit in terms of how it presents that data, how quickly you can analyze it, how you can break it down, and the ways you can visualize it for different parts of the team.
We talked to Yammer about the paid and the kind of Andromeda and how that's kind of changing. What from a data perspective are we seeing changing in terms of tracking and analysis from Meta and also maybe in the paid one? Any sort of big updates there?
We are expecting more updates to come from Google quite soon, so watch this space. But things like server-side implementation, I know we've talked about it quite a lot towards the end of last year, but that is going to be one of the key things that they will be pushing this year. If you have a Google account, you've probably seen Google Gateway appearing at the top, and Google Gateway is a simplified version of server-side, which only works for Google, where essentially you can use Cloudflare or other content delivery networks in order to deliver some of your tagging. That filling the gap that is caused by privacy, cookies, and all of those changes that happened over the years is a real focus, because that gap in data is a real problem.
Have you got any data on the percentages of the differences between server-side versus sort of standard cookie deployment?
So server-side, on average, and it varies wildly, will generally give about 20% more in terms of conversion data, and that will quite often lead to a 20% increase or a further 20% increase.
Right.
So you could have, imagine your cost per acquisition could be 40% less. 20% of that is driven by just tracking more. The next 20% of that is actual better decisions being made.
So better accuracy of data
exactly.
collected.
The better that data is, the better the smart bidding tools can be.
So server-side is a must for 2026 because it will massively improve your accuracy.
Yes, I can't think of any paid platform now that doesn't say you need this. And they have tools that will help to make it happen.
So those are things that are happening in the world of paid and also in the world of data. If you found that useful, do check out our content on our socials and our website. And do remember, get involved, because 2026 is going to be a year where everything changes when it comes to digital marketing, and particularly driven by AI. So if it's of use, do follow along, and we'll see you next time.